Hello there! Welcome to the ReZero podcast. I'm your host, Wolf. Today, we will be discussing and analysing Arc 7, Phase 5, Part A of the ReZero web novel. Yes, that was a lot of addition to that. Me and my wonderful co-host will be getting straight into this. But first, introduce yourselves, please, gentlemen.
Hello, I'm Gold, and I'm your other host today. Woo!
And I'm Connor. I am your final host today.
I guess I'm the middle host.
We're free.
So you said other. It was host, other, final. It all works. So we're doing Phase 5A today. For those of you who don't know, Phase 5 covers the same time frame happening in two different locations. And so we're going to be covering everything that's happening in Chaos Flame, as well as backstories and histories and other things that we get established as happening or shown through these chapters too.
So first off, we're going to talk a bit about our overall thoughts and feelings about this part of the phase, positives, negatives, criticisms, and just what we got out of it. Would anyone like particularly to start first? Because if not, I can.
I will, because I notoriously do not like this phase. I thought it was the lowest point of the entirety of Arc 7, if not everything past probably Arc 2, generally. I have a lot of issues with it. It heavily features two of my least favorite characters in all of Arc 7 that I just don't like to read. And the reread this time showed that it wasn't as bad as I remembered it was. I'm sure having more high quality translations than when this was initially released helps with that, but I still don't think very highly of this half of this phase overall, nor has it changed my impression of the characters that I am not a fan of. But there was a lot more highlights within it than I remembered there being, and I was glad to get to experience them and actually enjoy them this time.
So whilst you would say your overall thoughts and feelings have been maybe like reinforced, you still got a little things where you say, I got stuff out of this.
I wouldn't even say reinforced. It was probably lessened a bit. Like it is reinforced, yes, that it is my low point of Arc 7, are these like 5 or 6 chapters. But it wasn't as bad as I remembered them being. Though it has not altered my view of a couple of the characters at all.
Which
I still just wish they were gone.
I guess we'll move on to you next, Gold, then, before we move on to me.
Yeah, I thought this arc was... It was. That's it. That's the thought. It was. But no, seriously. I was thinking about the fact that this arc is structurally a bit messy. We'll be talking about it a bit in detail, like together, about some of our gripes with that. I think the organization of perspectives was a bit off. I feel like some of the emotional threads were, you throw too much at the wall at one time, and it's hard to focus on one feeling. And if we knew these characters for longer, it'd be easier to care about all their various plights. But because we couldn't, trying to shotgun all these different emotional battles everyone's going through makes like the whole of it less, right?
Yeah.
Because if you focused on just, say, Yorna and her, plight with the city and her love of the citizens and their love of her, and say that was a huge thing that you kind of focused in on, and everyone else, is supporting her. Maybe a few side plots going on that are, just giving more plot details, right? And giving more how-tos or like why or where, In this, we get too much because Tepe literally goes into their perspectives. We get a deep look into people in a very quick amount of times. Mysteries are set up and then resolved in half of this arc. And by the way, we're doing the first half, this A half. And in this A half, we kind of have to go through a lot of trials and tribulations that kind of get, quickly churned through with Yorna, with Terada, with Al. And we'll talk about 3 of them individually in terms of how we like them. But yeah, I feel like the things that they focused on were a bit messy.
Yeah, I have very mixed feelings on this part of the phase. I really enjoy some of the plot thread and lore building, lore and world building, some character and emotional elements at the beginning and start of this like mini arc within the arc. But some of the middle chapters in this felt really difficult to read. Like it was a slog, not to the point where I felt like I had to put it down, but to the point where I'm like, this is noticeably not as enjoyable as the rest of the series for me. I will say a lot of my worries and kind of concerns with how I was feeling were alleviated by the ending of this mini phase, which I think we will probably dedicate a little section of itself to its own because it's very interesting. But overall, I did enjoy some of the character moments in this. From a structural perspective, I very much agree with the boys and feel I think Teppei experimented here. He did something that he doesn't normally do, because it's like, as a contrast to this, think of Arc 5, where Teppei bounces around onto different characters a lot. He dedicates whole chapters, or at least half a chapter, normally, to one perspective. Here, we get at least, 3 to 4 perspectives, at least, for each chapter? Or, if not 3 or 4 separate characters, we see this character's perspective, then that character's perspective, and then we go back to that first character's perspective, and then that other character's perspective. And it's just very jarring to read. I almost feel like, right, Teppei writ this almost as if it was supposed to be a visual medium.
Oh, he does that a lot.
Yeah, specifically because of the way he writes, right?
And another thing that's interesting about that, we bring it up, of course, Teppei actually does write for visual mediums too. Quite often is contracted to work on animes nowadays as a writer. And yeah, I could see how his enjoyment of that kind of either aids or abets some of the writing when he kind of falls out of style for ReZero. That's what it feels like here.
Because it's very much a thing of it's not an outright criticism or weakness, because there's points where it's a really strong point for the series and works super well. I think this is just the part where maybe it doesn't work as well. At least in my opinion.
I think this would have worked better for me if we had stuck to the whole, similar to how he just does this phase overall, in which we get the same period of time split amongst 2 different halves. If for this half of it, he had dedicated individual chapters to this is everything this character experiences during this crazy chaos, and then have it end with the giant explosion. And then each chapter, you're getting the blanks filled in, where maybe the first one, it's entirely from, say, Al's perspective. And then we see his road from where he starts as the kid, goes and meets with Olbart, joins into the fight, has to repeat to get everything set up, but he doesn't know how everyone else got into the middle of the fray that they were in. And then the next time we see that from Yorna's, how she gets from the middle of the chaos to everything else. Then another time we follow Olbart and the others who would go off with Vincent's camp, and it just slowly fills in all of the events that went on at the same time. Yeah. Whereas this time it was very much he stuck with it chronologically for the most part. Where it was these events happen, and then he switches to this character when this event happens, and then he switches over for them to do this, and then he has to go back to a different group to recap what they were doing at that time, but only for a quarter of a chapter.
And it does feel very discombobulating, I think is the best way to say it. I think your suggestion of how that could have potentially been fixed, Connor, works quite well, because I was thinking myself of how would I fix this structurally as a writer, right? And that suggestion helps alleviate a lot of the worries of how changing how this would be written would affect the plot. If you split these 2 parts of each of their mini journeys throughout this phase into just separate chapters in the first half, and then the resolutions in the second half, right?
Kind of. You'll understand what the halves better mean when we get to those next time.
Ooh, okay.
But structural issues aside, there's still a lot of good to find in this arc. I know that you're particularly excited to talk about Al, but what I would actually rather us start with this time, if that's all right, is just talk about the quote-unquote great disaster overall.
Yes.
What Satella is doing here, or Subaru, or whatever's going on.
I think that's the best topic to start with.
100%. Do you want to head us off? Yeah.
Yes, we know that this gets kicked off because in Subaru's regressed form, when Albart kind of reaches back into his ode, somehow that triggers Satella finding him. And she goes like, found you, right?
Yep.
And then he explodes into this mass. And I don't know if I'm alone in this, but my first thought when thinking about this is like the last form of Betelgeuse when he's chasing Subaru and Otto in the cart. And he's just this mass of blackness with like his head separated from the rest of his body and a bunch of the hands moving around. Because we get a little bit from Subaru's perspective in this, that he feels like his head and his limbs and everything are detached from the rest of himself. And that the other characters come to realize that his will is what's making the shadows reach out towards the people that he cares about and that he wants.
So my curiosity with this, I guess in that sense, because of those reveals, is this way more like a twisted version of Subaru's will than it is Satella's directly?
That is my impression of this. Because when Satella lashes out in these giant forms of shadows, she's either going after something that Subaru cares about maliciously, but he wasn't in it yet, or she's going after him.
Okay.
It's never been a case of trying to reach for his friends. Like when she's possessing Amelia and attacking the sanctuary, once she runs out of targets, then she starts to move towards the mansion and Rem and all that. But once Garfield gets involved, her focus is on eliminating him and the rest. But this attack, this disaster, never directly attacks Kaufma or Abel. It's only going after Yorna and Louis. And then Medium later.
Well, you know, something I was thinking about is that Satella says, you know, she's using this power for his own protection and for himself. And he can use the power however he wishes. I wouldn't be surprised if in some synergy or something like that, like some moment where they're two minds, bodies, whatever, souls, you know, their desires, their envy, their, you know, the obsession that Satella has, if when they overlap, it creates the singularity where Satella says, okay, the reins are over to you, do whatever you want, you know. And like we talked about before with this, like, it definitely feels like a coalescence. Like it feels like something has manifested here just through emotions or, you know, energy, like this sort of desire. You know, that's sort of the thing that we've seen more so than anything, with which envy is her overwhelming desire, right? So if it can aid Subaru anyway, I think she can manifest in this way. And she's done it before. She's done it in the Sanctuary. And I think this is just a way to do it here. Instead of Amelia, maybe she's trying to manifest inside the Subaru in some way.
That just gave me a big thought, actually, Gold. That is a really interesting point of that differentiating this event from the Sanctuary event, specifically because she isn't in Amelia. Is that why she doesn't have...
She's not in Amelia in Arc 6 either when she's attacking the tower.
Is that why it feels like, in this sense, it almost feels like Subaru's reins are on this, almost? Like maybe... And this is also my personal speculation, right? But because of what Albart did to Subaru's ode and Satella not being able to view what's going on is the impression that was going on, right? What if the combination of her not having a direct vessel and also her rush to go and find Subaru means however she set this up meant she didn't have much direct control over the events of the disaster itself, and Subaru's emotions were taking over what was happening?
Well, his emotions definitely were. Like, we get a little bit of his perspective at the beginning of chapter 57, which initially seems like he's in the Shadow Garden, in like that detached sense. But reading a bit more into it, like once he kind of starts to hear Satella's voice almost fade off, like it becomes distant, hard to hear. He gets to the point of asking for someone, and then with his limbs and head detached from his torso, he is unable to move, unable to do anything himself. So he needed to rely on those around him. Isn't there anyone who could help him? Someone who could lend him a hand? Anyone who had treated him well? Because if someone came with him, that would be the solution. And then this only finishes, and it only successfully goes away when someone joins into the shadows. It looks like it just because she blows up, right? But then we find at the end that he took her with him to wherever he ended up. So like this is the hands and form of these shadows are Subaru reaching out, trying to grasp onto someone that can help him.
Almost like a moment of his envy. I
don't even want to call it his envy. I think it's literally just a scared kid crying out for help and reaching for anyone who would help him, which is Yorna, Medium, Louis, and then eventually, for whatever reason, Tanza jumps in, and that's when the disaster fades.
And he specifically doesn't reach for Abel or Owl, right?
I don't know if he reached for Owl or not, but he was not reaching for Kafma.
He's reaching for a mother. You know, I was thinking about this though, like seriously, and you're right. It does feel like a childish yearning and longing. Do you think that this is going to be a weird thing to say? So stick with me here. This is my tinfoil hat theory.
Okay.
Do you think that Satella also feels this yearning for a mother?
I don't know if it's about yearning for a mother necessarily, rather than just anyone who was kind and willing to help him out. And even though Tanza doesn't have that kindness towards Subaru yet, she's in the soul marriage technique with Yorna, and so that may have counted.
Oh, it's almost like that's part of Yorna, so therefore that is Yorna.
Right. So he was reaching for Yorna, reaching for Louis, reaching for Medium, and when Tanza jumps in, it may have felt into Subaru's witch factor, envy, connection to Satella, whatever this disaster was, that he managed to get a hold of someone that could help him, which was Yorna through her soul marriage to Tanza, which she shared with Subaru. Subaru's in that was trying to be brought into the soul marriage as well during the 11 Seconds of Hell.
Yeah.
And unlike when Olbart was pulled into the shadows, Tanza clearly was not destroyed. Like, Subaru has her with him in the water at the end, whereas Olbart's hand was destroyed when it made contact.
In that sense, especially if she represents Yorna, it's almost like an opposite effect, right? Of that's a welcoming, loving thing, and Olbart was the thing that's probably terrified Subaru the most, like, ever.
It was also in contact with him when it started, in fairness.
Yeah. You know what I
initial
thought
blast,
about?
Almost.
What if the shadow didn't get expelled by the explosions, but rather just like finally grasping somebody solve the issue? You know
yes,
what I mean?
that's what I was getting at. That eventually he was reaching for Yorna, and when Tanza jumped in, that was the equivalent of having successfully grabbed Yorna.
Okay.
Yeah, because when you think about it, right, Subaru that entire time was being protected by Yorna, right? So like the idea that he wanted, like, but it feels a bit, it feels a bit strange. The Satella's voice, because now I'm getting the idea that it's also. I know we kind of write down like a drinking game where every single time we mention a sin as allegory for the story, you get to take a drink. But when like seriously though, like that's a good way of thinking about the story narratively. But anyways, I was gonna say, it feels like that the yearning for Yorna's protection was what spurred on the sort of coalescence of this power, if that makes sense. This like pathetic childishness.
Narratively, yes, because this only happened because they were looking to go and get Yorna recruited.
Yeah, you're right. It really is like that. When you think about it too, it's like this all has to do with their own, like, recruiting somebody, not in the sense of like winning over them, but winning over yourself. You know what I mean? This is what this arc feels like, maybe, is what he's trying to do. It's like Yorna, incidentally, as a matter, just has to tag along now because the city's destroyed. But it's not like their character necessarily, beside like Abel's a little bit, but she's kind of still angry. Really wins over Yorna and's like, okay, now it's time to, hit on the road. It's more like all of them kind of had to grow up a bit in this arc. Is what it felt like all the characters.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the reason why Olbart turned them into children, because I think that's what he was trying to go for. This growth of self rather than the thing of being like, we have to go recruit this guy. We have to go recruit this guy.
wouldn't even say that's what Olbart is going for. What Olbart has said before, the reason this technique exists is because it completely neutralizes the ability for an opponent to fight back.
Don't mistake me. I don't mean Olbart himself. I mean to pay through Olbart.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah, but I will agree, like, narratively, that's what's being said, right? And my curiosity here is it's very specifically the one who grows up in this phase is Ao, right?
Yep.
So if you're happy and finished with the Great Disaster, I want to transition into Ao and some of Olbart's stuff in this phase.
There's a bit more I wanted to talk on it, and in regards to it not being the or that great disaster.
Yes.
That apparently a horrible apocalypse has been foretold to these stargazers. It's like a word that Abel knows. It's a word that Vincent knows. It's a word Oobleek knows and claims this is not it. And it's a word that Tarita knows through Mariuli. A horrible disaster that's coming for the Empire. And that in order to prevent it, someone was supposed to murder Abel. Or Subaru, possibly. But that this isn't it. This is just a random interluder, as Abel refers to it. Interloper. And I wanted to ask your thoughts of, if this horrible calamity isn't the great disaster of the Ark, what could be coming for them?
So, my only thought here is, I guess we'll move on we won't move on in general, but I'll move into why I believe what I think is going to happen might happen. So, we learn throughout this phase in particular and the previous phase about stargazers, right? These people that can deem the future or fate through the stars specifically. And we before we start recording this podcast, we made a pointed contrast, as if this is almost Valakia's dragon tablet, right? Their way of trying to deem what fate has ahead for the country.
I think Subaru made that comparison early in Arc 7.
Yeah.
But rather than... So, Olbart says that they come from the stars, but from the perspective of the stargazers we've gotten, that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case.
Yes. And this is where I'm going with this, and this is probably crackpot as hell, right? But we learn about these things called observers. These beings that are... Because Abel mentions that stargazers are puppets of the observers, right? I think specifically is what he mentions. Mm-hmm. And this makes me think that maybe these observers are going to be the cause of this great disaster in the future. That they are seeing the world not go the direction they want, because Subaru and Ao and their authorities are going to get mixed in this and fuck it all up, quite honestly. Or at least not in the way I imagine they want it to go, is my running theory. So, does that mean these observers are going to do some weird magical space stuff and is going to cause a great terrible disaster, like stars falling from the sky or something? This is just me spitting random ideas at this point. But it has to be an apocalyptic level disaster, right? If this is not the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's currently where my thoughts are at. This has something to do with these observers that are mysterious, and every single time we hear about them from these stargazers' perspective, it feels malevolent, right? At least that's the impression I get. There's a malevolent feeling behind it.
I would call it cold more than malevolent.
Cold, yes.
Unfeeling,
yeah. There's no human touch to this whatsoever.
Yeah. They're godly, and they have this sort of inclination that everything is preordained, that sort of idea that your influence in the world doesn't matter. As I said, it's like a puppet show, right? The idea is that, they kind of, everything is produced already, and all you need to do is sort of just garnish it a little bit to make it look as if it was real, right? But we see through this arc that the observers, though they say fate is like this, right, was one way, as we've seen, there are ways to transpose or oppose fate. The authorities seem to be one of those ways to do it. We've seen also the fact that, when Terada and what's her name? Her
Mariuli.
Mariuli. When Mariuli, like they talk about this, they can actually resist the will of the observers, right?
Could she?
Well, she couldn't, right? But the idea is that they're now on a course to kind of go beyond it, right? Sorry, Terada now. And that sort of idea that like there's a way to kind of oppose fate seems possible or plausible at least.
I think it's, from what we've seen in the story so far, though, the only thing that's been able to successfully oppose and change fate have been Subaru and possibly Al. I don't know if Al's is actually changing fate or not, because his looping are on such small scales.
Yeah.
Like, it changes the result of this one battle. Like, clearly that means that things aren't predetermined because he can change the outcome of stuff. But, like, Subaru changes events rather drastically.
Yes.
And like, Pandora is the only other one, actually, in hindsight, that has an ability similar, where she can change the way that things are.
Yeah, I mean that's why Pandora.
It's not even fate; it's reality manipulation, right?
Right, but doing so then changes
It's the
fate.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the thing about that is that Pandora's entire thing is that it gives you posits an interesting question to all of us, right? If the observers are malevolent, like you think, Wolf, then if Pandora is the ultimate enemy of the observers by having this authority that alters their preordained, the way of fate that they weave, right? Or is she a bad person in the cosmic sense? You know what I mean?
So it's almost like the greater good begets all my necessary evil.
Well, I think that's what she thinks.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, right?
Actually, let me posit this though. What if I'm wrong and she can't actually change fate, and that her ability to warp reality around her is only able to change things that, quote, the observers haven't ordained?
So it's almost like she can't manipulate the main character, the main story. She can
Right, because she can't say like Amelia opens the seal.
You're right.
Or even she sees the key. She's able to say, like, after Regulus has done his fight, you're home with your wives.
Okay, now, on this, like...
I can't remove the sin, but I can fix your arm.
Yeah.
To Goose.
Okay, so, if this is the line we're going on here, right, and we're coming back to the seal, does that mean Pandora's ultimate goal is to fight against these observers by unlocking the seal? Like, this is the way she gets to do what she wants to do and change fate as it was, right?
I'm still positive that behind that seal is just Minerva's body. I think that's just witch cult stuff, but it's maybe her power works by being able to change things that the observers haven't preordained, stuff that isn't tied down to fate.
Well, because this gets to, like, one of the main themes of the series, right, is Subaru and, by extension, other characters trying to fight their negative fate. Almost like their preordained destiny, as we see it at this point, because this is a rather interesting idea. If Subaru has, or at least is borrowing this authority from Envy to try and change fate in this roundabout way, is that why his luck, and I straight up mean luck as in like an actual cosmic sense, is so abysmal? Like, Is it almost as if the universe is trying to balance out all of Subaru's changes? So he just keeps on coming up across more and more obstacles, and more things keep happening. Because, again, this is just, like, obviously from a narrative perspective, this has to happen for the story, right? But in an in-universe way, is it almost as if the universe is trying to correct itself and lead towards this fate, and Subaru's just trying to prevent the inevitable?
Like Final Destination, you escape death, so it's going to keep coming after you until it manages to get you.
That honestly is almost a good comparison of what I'm thinking here. Almost that Final Destination level way of the universe working.
It's possible.
Because
that Subaru's fate is to die, and so with this one power that lets him go back and avoid that last death, it just can lead to a new one. And
this is going to extend to our previous... Now I'm going to extend this to our previous theories about Owl in a little way, right? There's a point in this phase, and we see this multiple times from Owl, where he reiterates a very, very similar line Subaru says about challenging fate. And to me, with how it comes across, I'll talk more about this, but at least for this, I need it for this. Ao believing he needs to follow Subaru and believing he needs Subaru for something. He needs Subaru to be this hero because he can't be it. Is that because he feels his authority isn't strong enough to fight against this preordained fate? The stars. What the stars deem and want.
He gets a bit of his... In this phase even, he talks about getting some of his motivation back. To not be like a follower, right? Like...
Well, no, to be the follower.
To be the follower.
Sorry, to be the follower again, yeah. The idea is that, like, I think all of the authorities are about opposing fate, but you're right, there's affinities to them, right? Is Al's authority with pride great or diminished? Is it just because he doesn't think it so? Because yeah, you're right. If he thinks so little of himself, then his authority wouldn't be capable of, opposing the observers that way.
Because we see through Ao's character, Ao is a character that, in a similar vein to Subaru, is not a very prideful person, at least in my impression. Like, when it comes to Priscilla, he feels his victory is guaranteed, but he believes that through Priscilla, not necessarily about himself. I find there's a lot of self-hatred in Ao. He feels himself to be a coward, and we see a lot through this phase is a great. This part of the phase is a great showing. Ao is scared and afraid, and he tells other characters, "I'm never going to stop being afraid or scared," and he's aware of that, and that is an element of almost him feeling. I think like he doesn't feel prideful to me.
I read it as opposite. I think he does feel prideful, but he's just ashamed of a lot of aspects about himself.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's the same way a lot of the Synarch bishops are poised, where we know that Al's not insane, right? Not in the same way the Synarch bishops are.
I would say Al is insane.
I would say
I know, not in the same way that our Synarch bishops are, but then I pause in a breath and then say, well, the narration literally says somebody who's capable of dying thousands of times must be, even
crazy.
more insane than Subaru. Yeah, Subaru. But I mean in the sense that he is at least trying to, there's push and pulls in his, conscious about like what he's doing. He falters.
In an interesting idea, because this is a premise that I've been noticing more, especially with Al referring to it when we see from his perspective. Subaru, because of how long-winded his return by death can be sometimes in terms of periods of time, he has less of an ability, in my opinion, to cope with the trauma of what's going on through the lens of it being almost like a video game, right? Where Al, I feel, and he makes reference to it a lot, like, oh, this is like a boss battle, or this is a part of the game that's impossible to beat, where it feels like Al has rationalized his authority as almost like him save scumming and trying to get the best end to a fight in a game.
Well, he does. Like, that's his whole concept. And I think a lot of his like cowardice and the weakness that he feels is an aspect of him as a child, being like this weak, helpless, defenseless person who doesn't have his authority to fall back on.
Yeah.
Whereas when we see Subaru as a kid, he does not have that impression. Subaru as a kid is the gifted child. He's the one that can succeed at anything he puts his mind to without an issue. Something we know is true of regular Subaru as well, even if he just doesn't believe it.
Yes. It's that thing of Subaru has always had this, but the Subaru we're at before child Subaru is someone who did not believe that was within himself, and so used Rem, and being Rem's hero is his way of being something greater, right?
Mm-hmm. Where with Al, we have someone who is a coward, is weak, doesn't want to try and do things the hard way, but wants to run in with an instant death solution to game the fight against the great disaster.
You're right, because when we see Echidna at the end of Arc 4 talking to Subaru about his decision, she is telling Subaru, you are taking the difficult path, right? And the easy path would be to gamify it almost, and to die over and over again, and to just constantly retry, and to not put value on your own life. But Subaru is taking the hard and difficult path by trying to love himself and still keep the others around him safe.
I almost wonder if Al is supposed to teach Subaru to be more confident in his own viewpoints. Because in the way that they're paralleled, it always seems like Al is doing the more unhealthy version of whatever Subaru is doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like in a way that he's a follower, he is like a poser, you know what I mean? And I think Al feels like a poser. Like I don't think Al feels like he is the hero that can beat these bosses unless he thinks of it fictitiously. And in that way, he's able to do insane things, not realizing that there's people around him that have actual feelings, or that he should open up and be honest with himself and with other people.
I mean,
I think that that's his prideful nature, that people don't deserve or don't need or can't want him as he's lesser, right?
yes.
Like this weakness that he has, he feels like sharing them to himself can't be loved. It's the same thing that Subaru learned in Arc 4, where it's like, you know, do you really think that, you know, you should suffer alone? Like, let other people suffer with you. You know, I think Al still is in that moment of like, no, I must suffer all on my lonesome.
Yeah. And in that sense, extending this, we learn in this mini phase that Al's helmet is basically indestructible.
Yeah, I imagine that's to make sure that he doesn't get instant killed by something before his authority has a chance to kick in.
But I think this also has a narrative thing, right? Of like, it's a physical representation of his pride, because whenever he wears Hit, he doesn't show his emotions and his feelings to others. And in that sense of almost like, once he has his helmet, that is indestructible. And the whole reason he's vulnerable within this mini phase is because he doesn't have it on. And as soon as he has it back on, he has that full confidence back.
That's true. Something else. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say real quick. It makes sense that he freaks out about a last phase not having the helmet, and then on top of that, it kind of pays off with the fact that Abel's thing with his mask falling off in this phase. There's like a thing, like a theme with that here that Teppei's playing with, like the masks people wear, the helmets that they don. You know, that changes who they try to present themselves as, even if it's not true, if it's just a convenient way of posing yourself as something that you aren't. I think that's a theme here.
Which is a further extension of the themes we've already seen with Natsumi as a concept, and Subaru being Rem's hero, and just Subaru being the way he used to pose in the earlier arcs of like who he was and what he's trying to be.
Mm-hmm.
This all plays into a lot of theme of people almost they wearing these masks, whether they be physical or mental or both, and them avoiding who they're supposed to be, right? Because as we've theorized before, if Al is the hero and Subaru is supposed to be the sage, and Al is trying to reverse those things, is he not in a sense, maybe in a sense, right? These roles that are being played are what are supposed to fight the observer's preordained fate, and by Al trying to not be the follower and trying to be the sage instead of the hero, he is actually playing into the observer's desires to stop this from countering what they desire. Again, this is my crackpot theories extending from what we've already built. But
I don't know if Al is necessarily trying to be the sage and not the hero.
But
Rather, I think he's just trying to be the sage in general, and he's going to accomplish that by making sure the role is not taken by Subaru. So he has to make him the hero.
Yeah, so therefore he has to make someone else take the role of hero.
Right.
Which even plays into the idea of what we were talking about before, of if Pandora is the one who summoned him, and him being the false star name, right? Like, because Aldebaran is not a Japanese name.
No. And Al doesn't even remember his past, even though that's dubious. I think it's partially true, right?
Yeah, he has apparently he doesn't remember his time before being in this world.
And that's said in Arc like 2. Like that, he says that he doesn't remember much.
I wonder that this is just a really crackpot for you. What if Ao is not actually from our world, and this is just a construction of how Pandora was like, okay, I want someone from this world to fulfill this role. And so that was built with her authority, that even though he has amnesia and can't remember the events of before, he is supposed to be a person from that world. And so he talks and acts like that and has cultural relations.
It's possible. As a minor thing for the Al discussion before we move on or any of it, something I wanted to point out that I noticed him doing this arc, and I realized it actually applies in the past as well. He doesn't refer to the people around him by their proper names ever. He calls Subaru Bro, Yorna Fox Babe, Abel Chan, Medium Little Miss, and then Kaufma like Thorn Guy or Bug Guy.
And he calls Priscilla Princess, right?
Yeah. He does occasionally refer to her as Priscilla, but it's typically Princess. He's like Schultz Chan is like the closest he comes to calling anyone by their proper name. And I think it just probably speaks to part of his character that he doesn't see them as people. Because everyone else has died or he has died so many times that they aren't real to him anymore.
Oh, he's become desensitized, almost like how Subaru used to view people as NPCs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that he just sees them as NPCs. Oh, this is the Fox girl. This is Abel, like the boy Abel. This is the boy Schultz. This is my brother, like the only other person around with me. This is the guy with thorns.
And that's almost why he has to be the follower, because Subaru is the only other person that isn't an NPC in his mind.
He still only calls him bro, though. He doesn't call him Subaru.
That's true. Do you think he's so desensitized at this point? He's not even considering Subaru to be a person in that logic?
He thinks that he's the wisest person, right? So if he's a sage, then that's an arrogance beyond belief, right? Mm-hmm. So even then, like, it doesn't matter where you're from. If he thinks that he's the smartest person here, then that would explain why he treats them as, objects rather than people.
Interesting.
So that was just something I noticed this time. Like, I've always noticed that he called Subaru bro for whatever reason, but he doesn't refer to most people by name. I think the only one he has, like, consistently is Rom, but I can't even say that for certain because it's been so long since I've read, like, his stuff from Arc 3.
Yeah. Well, from what I remember, he normally refers, whenever he's talking about it to Rem, and he's saying your sister, right? Or am I wrong in thinking that?
I can't remember. I just know that he has some pre-existing relationship with Rom, which we are assuming is him being one of the ones that attacked the village when she lost her horn.
Yeah.
We can move on to the next topic.
Yeah. So I guess speaking of Fox Bay, we can talk about Yorna's arc through this phase.
Yeah.
Yorna is always a highlight for me. I love everything about her, and I think she has the most interesting circumstance to overcome in this phase.
Yeah, as I said before, I almost wish that this was the primary theme throughout this phase. And it is the strongest when it's kind of put together, but I think in the way that everything's going on too much, it's almost a little bit understated at times. Like, yeah, sure, like we see her being devastated and strong and convicted in the way that she is a general of Lachia, as well as a kind-hearted person. That sort of duality, and also the mysteriousness of like how strong she is and the nature of, the way that she protects people through her ability. But there's definitely a really good, we see the way that she cares about people very, distinctly, like how she kind of is always looking out for the children around her. She's in this awful situation that her life could be ended at any moment, but she's only thinking about other people the entire time, And I think that's one of the most beautiful things. We see more about the history, about like how the city was built and how she loves the city, not because of how it looks or how beautiful it is, but because of how they were given to her by people that love her and care for her, and how she returns that through her power. We see, the strength that she, and the conviction she has, trying to make sure that she takes it all on herself. She sees, Abel still, hesitating to, fight, whether with the Yang sword or whatever. And she's like, you're a coward. You're just supposed to be the emperor, like all these different things. And she's like, I'll become the emperor if you're not going to be, I'll do whatever it takes to stop this. She's like, it doesn't matter if I have to overthrow you, if it doesn't matter if I have to do whatever. I'll make sure that the entire world becomes, something that I love, as long as I can protect the people that I care about.
Do you know what's an interesting point of comparison here? I apologize to interrupt, but this is a really good point to segue. Isn't Yorna's love like the complete opposite to Capella's love?
Capella, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And, another thing is the juxtaposition that I thought was going to be more clear in this phase, and I kind of called it out. I tried to call my shot beforehand last podcast recording, was I thought they were going to, parallel or put together side by side Satella's love, the love me, that thing, with Yorna's love, and how Yorna's love is more strong and resolute. And that does happen, right? But that's
yeah, I mean, that is the opposition. This is supposed to be the representation of Satella's toxic love for Subaru, is this power. And her way to fight against it is rejecting her and saying, I don't love you. And that makes the buildings, the castle, the people all toxic to this disaster, explosive within it.
And in that sense, because genuinely, the way Yorna loves people and the way people love Yorna is, I can't understate this, beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. It's very heartwarming and wholesome, and it's very meaningful, even to the characters around. Abel points out near the end of this, and this is how he convinces Yorna to abandon the city itself, that the whole point of the city is that the city isn't the thing that the people love. They love Yorna. And no matter where Yorna goes, they will go with her. That's what the real Chaos Flame is. It's not the physical representation of the city. It's not even the castle that they built for her, because they wanted a pretty thing. It's not even the dress and the ornaments she has that are all parts of people that live there. It's her and her love.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. And I can't help but think about this, and I apologize. But it reminds me of the way that she treats and loves things, and kind of talks about how, deeply she cares about things and her possessions, right? And the way that she sees people as, extensions of her own love, even her possessions are just kind of the
representations of the people.
Yes. Representations of the people rather than things. That's why she can love them, and the way that the power kind of works, where to care about it so much gives her strength. And I just wondered about this, and I was like,
well, no. So her care for it gives them strength. It gives them her strength.
Yes. Gives them her strength. Yeah, they power up, right? Yeah. Is there? I'm drawing a blank. Is there a power that's like this in the story? Because I think there is, right? I just honestly forget.
I don't believe so. The soul marriage technique is something introduced with Yorna.
How does Priscilla's lockets and stuff? Do you remember she wore in the battle?
I know the answer to that. I can't tell you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All I say is you're on the right track for it. And you probably actually do know the reason yourself. And it is because of that connection that, yes, it is the same thing. But I can't explain it fully.
Yeah, I'm just generally curious because that sort of, love for is a magic that we haven't really seen before.
It's almost an opposite. Now I think about it, this is a cool comparison we could make here, right? Specifically Yorna's soul marriage technique, it's almost like an opposite to Subaru's Corleonis. In that sense of, instead of Yorna giving out these parts of her soul with soul marriage to these people to make them stronger, Subaru uses Corleonis to try and take burdens off people, take their weakness, right? Onto himself.
Well, he can also spread it around.
But he
doesn't have to be on himself.
It doesn't just have to be on himself, I know. But what I'm trying to say is there's some really cool, parallels between a lot of these powers.
Right. Corleonis is based more on trust.
Trust, yeah.
And companionship in each other, whereas Yorna's does have to be two ways, like Corleonis does. Like he does, like, you need to love me, you need to accept my love for you in order to get it to work for Subaru, which he couldn't do, and it's why the 11 seconds happen the way that they do.
Yeah.
But Yorna's love, we get an example of it starting with someone proper, with Tanza, who apparently came to her with her sister, and then her sister was lost, and she effectively got adopted by her. And that is an example of what she's done for this one specific kid. But you have to imagine that it's similar for all the people in the city. Yeah. That's why she can empower all of them like that. And each of them get their strength from her, but it doesn't take anything from her. Like Corleones has to take something in order to like power someone up. It moves things around. Whereas love in this case, and this is going to sound a little corny, but unlike trust, which has to be shared and given, or like just your strength, which you only have so much of, and once you spend it, it's gone. Love is an infinite resource. It is something that no matter how much you love someone, you can love somebody else just as much and continue to build it up, which is an important part of Subaru's character. He loves a lot of people, a lot.
Yeah. And
so if he had soul marriage, it wouldn't do a lot for everyone, but he could do it to a ton of people, which is another... Let me finish this one part, and I'll go to segue. It's another part of her power that we do hear explained from the narration with that soul marriage. Her soul marriage was different from others, not because she could do it to as many as she had. That was stated that wasn't significant. Anyone could share their love with as many people as they wanted to. But that her soul, which was being shared, was 1,000 times stronger than most, which is why it was so impactful for everybody else.
Which is a crazy cool thing. Like
it is. I know Gold knows what that means. I know what that means. What do you think that means, Wolf?
I genuinely have no clue. And the reason I'm going to say I have no clue here is because specifically this is not related to Ode at all in the story at this point. And what I thought the soul was at this point in the story was the Ode, right? That's how I imagined it to be. So,
they're linked, but it's not one and the same.
Yeah. And now I'm getting this thing of like, this is not one and the same. I genuinely do not know what that means. I can't tell if that is like an element of like saying this is their character, the strength of their character, the strength of who they are as a person. That is the only thing I could think of at this current point. That's my current speculation.
Yeah.
Because Yorna is a strong person, not in the tradition. She's strong in the physical sense, but I mean like in terms of force of personality and as like a moral person, she is one of the strongest people we've met in the series thus far.
I was gonna talk about that. The fact that, you know, I keep on saying this, but the way in which the powers of this world is being expanded. Like if I'd seen or thought about the soul marriage technique before this arc, I would have thought this must be authority, right? Because it's like so crazy in the way
I thought the exact same thing when it was introduced. Was wondering, is this enough? Did I miss a sin after I went back and looked up melancholy? That there was like a ninth I didn't know about.
Because it's really one of those things that manipulated in such a way that just feels crazy. I mean, of course, Olbart's power is also crazy in that way. But there's actually something about this that's actually very interesting. This comes off the heels of Arc 6, where the foundations of souls and the names and the books of the dead and all this stuff is sort of all lined out for you, right? Mm-hmm. And then in this, he's almost furthering it, being like, what is the soul in this, universe? What is the Ode? What is, the influence of, blessings? Divine protections, I should say, and like where do they come from? Who chooses it, right? How does the world work? And it feels like that answer being like more complicated than ever seems a lot more possible, which makes you thinks things like, souls and whatever kind of is the answer to how Emilia and Satella work. And stuff like that, like I feel like that answer is in there somewhere. Like there's something.
You got me. You have me on a theory that I wish I could discuss. We'll have to wait another phase or two before I can bring this back up. You have me on a new theory now, Gold. Remember the thought of like I need to actually write this down. Okay. I'm going to keep that one in mind for later. But you got me on something good. I think you're cooking with some gas over there.
I wonder, on the lines of what you're saying, Gold, and with the enthusiasm that Connor is saying, are you almost saying, Gold, that like the link between Emilia and Satella isn't their ode, it's their soul, and those two things being different is almost what separates them?
I think this arc also this phase even is also talking about that. And it's a thread that keeps on coming up that I'm wondering about, which is Rem and Ram are twins, right?
Yeah.
Then in this, we see Soul sisters, right? The
Soul sisters with the same color scheme, too. Tarita's is blue and Mariuli is pink.
I think the idea of their powers being halved because they were twins, I think that they're kind of getting the observer's will and their missive because they're twins, in quotes, right? Like, inheriting that will. I think in the same way, I wonder if, and this is just me saying this, I don't know. There might be more details to this. I wonder if Emilia and Satella are twins.
So I'm in a similar vein to you, like on these lines.
Not even literally.
Gold.
Yeah.
But based on what you know regarding Yorna, soul marriage, etc., and like that character's history, I guess I can probably say this, is what if Emilia and Satella actually have the same ode? Because we see from Olbart that he's able to take someone's ode and reshape who they are around it.
Oh.
So if the ode defines your shape, I wonder if that's the connection between Emilia and Satella, is that they have the same ode, and so it's been linked together.
Do you think that in the same way that Echidna has created artificial spirits, that somebody created an artificial Satella?
That she's using soul transference on, though, because they look different from her. Roswell is using soul transference, and while he looks similar to his descendants, it's a change there.
What? And this is... Wait, hold on. Okay, I think we're all fucking cooking with gas here. Wait, hold on. So... and
you're, unfortunately, Wolf, you're missing one huge piece here that's very relevant.
I'm thinking... I know I'm missing a piece here, and I know when I do that, I'm going to start, like, slamming the table in excitement. Whenever we get to that point, and I'm really excited for that moment because I feel like you guys are going to have a lot to talk to me about with this. I'm thinking, right, we're talking so much about how important the ode and the soul is, and like you saying the ode defines the shape and how that's Olbart's manipulating that, right? Authorities, we see that Al loses his when his ode shape is changed by Olbart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that these divine protections, maybe the reason why someone with an authority can't have one, at least from my understanding, is because that ode is taken up by the authority?
Possibly. That would make sense.
The witch factor, I should say, not the authority. Sorry.
No, I got what you meant.
Yeah.
It also talks about like a very Eastern, like Japan philosophy thing, which is, does the soul manipulate the body or does the body manipulate the soul? Or the shape of the soul dictates how you look, or the other way around, and I think that's something that Tepe is trying to answer through a lot of these like questions, that like maybe if your soul looks the same or your ode looks the same, one of those two, it changes who you appear as and also your affinity with certain things.
Do you know what's really interesting, you saying that, Gold? In relation to that idea of like, what does the body mean for the soul? We know something about Subaru that is a very much an Eastern understanding. His eyes. So his eyes, I forget, it's Sanpaku, something like that.
Yeah, Sanpaku.
Yeah. It's commonly understood to be a bad sign, or like a sign of possession, or like there's something cursed about you, right? And that is almost like a physical feature about Subaru. But it could reflect on his soul, too. Or like his ode reflecting that onto his physical form. Is that almost like another representation of what Tepe may be trying to say with all of these things?
It's possible. Like, that might be that could be a link for what makes someone compatible with being in Subaru's position. Like, it's with the connections with like, oh, you look like Flugel. What if it's that they have a similar enough ode and that causes the shape of their eyes to be Sanpaku?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the similarities lie.
It's just a genetic trait.
Well,
so any further talk between odes and souls and like what having the same one as someone else means, we'll have to wait until later. Okay. Unfortunately, because there's the other piece that you're missing, dude, is just it's so important for this discussion. Big? It's pretty big.
Okay. All I'll say is I'm disappointed we can't talk about this more because I'm missing that piece, but I'm also so excited when I get that piece because I feel like our theories are going to go kind of crazy.
Right. In essence of it, my thought of Amelia and Satella being the only characters where they say they look the same, whereas with twins, they also look identical, but their power was split. That, to me, would imagine a shared ode.
Yeah, you know what also makes me wonder? When characters say you smell like blah, blah, blah.
You were saying, Gold, go and repeat the last thing you were mentioning.
Oh, I've completely forgot. I think I was saying, we were talking about... You remember?
I was summarizing my connection to Amelia.
Oh, right.
Between Amelia and Satella possibly having the same ode.
Yeah. I think that it's likely, yeah.
Okay.
It's likely, but I have more crackpot theories about it, but it might be disjointed. Like, it might come from a different angle. I agree with you. I just think we can get into talking about the way that I think the authority works with your soul and stuff like that. It's interesting.
This is another thing, right? If this is true and Amelia and Satella have the same ode, would that not mean that the soul is what determines what magical element you have? Because they have different magical elements, right?
Well, Roswaal has duplicated himself and transferred his soul into body after body, and he has an affinity for most of the elements. So maybe.
Yeah. And it's specifically soul transference, isn't it? It's not ode.
Right, it is soul transference. And same with what Echidna does into the Ryuzus, who are bodies shaped around odes duplicated from Ryuzu Mayor.
You're correct, yeah.
But eventually develop their own personalities.
That's a really early way that's pointed to that I never
That's
even
a good point, too. I thought about this, and it's like, if the soul is something, and we're just getting into things that I don't even know, because I don't even know what they are, right? But if we're talking about the observers being malevolent, one of the things that I was thinking about is the fact that, like, if the body is something tethered to this world, and that is something that they can orchestrate the fate of. One thing that always happens is that, in stories, magic is supposed to be humans' unfettered potential to try to reach the god-like powers that exist around them. There's gods out there, but magic is humans' potential to try to, create anything. It's the unlimited human spirit, I wonder if the soul is impossible to be manipulated by the observers. Oh. And as such, it kind of manifests as, like, if you manipulate that enough, you get maybe authorities or something like that. I don't know.
And would that, in that sense, right, if we take it, say, maybe the ode is the only thing that can be manipulated by these observers because it's controlled by a function of the world, Ode Lagna. Would that mean that maybe Subaru was brought here by the observers and not Satella?
I'm positive he's here from Satella, but it might be because of the observers. Like, she might be trying to commit to a fate that they've either deemed has to happen or won't happen.
Yeah.
Of you are going to come and kill me, and Subaru's immediate response is I'm going to come and save you.
Well, because if, like, the thing we were talking about with the Sanpaku and that being a thing with the ode, and that would be a thing that would maybe determine you're a sage, right? That's, again, crackpot theory. What
possibly
if then, because we know that the previous sage kind of failed in some ways. He didn't manage to unite, he failed to not unite all the sins because he didn't kill Satella and take her witch factor. Whether because he died or something went wrong or he didn't want to, regardless.
Maybe he did have them all united, just not in a person. He had Sloth in a box. Maybe he had them all in a box.
Oh, what? And
although that box was made out of his bones, so who knows?
That's part of him, right? So, yeah, I'm thinking along these lines of all of this different fate elements of the story. They're playing into something bigger. There's something more going on here, guys.
I just realized something, too. And this might be a bit of a stretch, but if the observers are talking about this great disaster, right? This disaster that's happening in Vlachia. And that is the same way things are referred to as the disaster that, the great disaster that destroyed half the world some time ago.
Well, those are actually notably different. The text refers to the translation for them was clarified at the beginning of one of the chapters that they do use different kanji
Right.
and katakana, and I went and checked that myself. The thing with Satella's might better be referred to as the Great Calamity in this context.
Okay, that
I
makes
do wonder though if they're slightly related in the sense that they are things brought about by people with authorities, right? And I wonder if this is kind of hard. I wonder if the prophesization of this by the observers is telling that people, hey, stop this from happening. This is something that is occurring only because these people with authorities are messing with the timeline, right? And if we're getting there, if Satella wants to go along with their guidance, right, and try to play out the fate that she knows, like maybe she's ashamed of her actions using her authority and is, resigned herself of the fate of death so that the sage can incorporate her body so that she can seal away the authorities once and for all and but inside somebody who can control it properly, right? If that's the case, I wonder if Pandora's goal is to stop that from happening. She doesn't want the sage to seal away the authorities again. He doesn't want she wants them to be free in the world so that they can destroy the observers,
Maybe.
Yeah, I really like that goal.
While we're on this discussion, and I'm kind of excited that we got into this because this feels like really deep ReZero lore.
Yeah.
I'm realizing now, we go back to Arc 4, right? Where we know for a fact the Gluttony Witch Factor is in the 3. Greed Witch Factor is in Regulus. We see them on screen present at that moment. In the Witch's Garden, in the Witch's Tea Party Garden, wherever Echidna's place is called, the souls of the other witches are trapped there. Echidna has them there preserved. But all of them still have their authorities.
Yeah, and all their bodies are still up there.
But she doesn't have their ode, right? She only has their souls.
Right, she has their souls because she's able to then move her soul into one of the Ryuzus.
Yeah, of Ryuzu.
Which is just a body shaped around an ode copied from Ryuzu Mayer, her ode is forming the barrier. Like, it is another shape around that body where each of them end up with their own souls on that. So the authorities then must be coming from the Witch Factor's influence on your soul.
Yeah.
Because the result of Echidna's Witch Factor and authority was the Book of Knowledge, which, from what we now know about the existence of the observers and their ability to say the true future to the stargazers, that's got to be what the Book of Wisdom wrote down, right? Was just everything that the observers knew was going to happen until Subaru comes along and changes it.
Well, it's like, hey, it's the ultimate insult to the observers, because if you're a regular mortal and you're like, yeah, I know everything you know, what can't you do?
Yeah. Now, this is some deep fucking shit, right? Like, this is coming back to the stuff we learn about Echidna in Arc 6. Through what we see of, like, the thing we show of her book, of her greed wanting to save people, right? Do you think that she was one of the first people to try and use that to fight against fate in that direct way?
Maybe. Yeah. I think Echidna's thing was more of wanting to control it than anything else.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
that could be why she gives Beatrice a blank book, so that she's not bound to that.
You're right. No, you're right, because she wants her to make her own decision. That's
why she says, I think that's a great thing, right? Because she truly believes in her own twisted way that sort of, like, cold hard, like, worksmanship, like self-acquired, fate is worth any pain, right? And that's why she thinks that, that's why she's in love with Subaru, because he embodies that wholeheartedly with what he does with his authority.
To extend that even further, maybe Echidna thinks of her own authority of the Tome of Wisdom to be a curse, because although she has this knowledge, she has no way to do the things she wants to truly do with this knowledge. And the only person that can defy this knowledge is Subaru.
Right, it's the envy witch factor.
Yeah.
Which is why she wants a taste of it when she's in her, like, malicious evil form. But when we see her as the loving mother and teacher, it's, I want you to stay here, hold on to this, Roswell's going to be coming, and you're just going to stay under his care. Eventually, you're going to give all this to someone that you can trust, okay? And that's how she leaves it in reality. The Beatrice's vision of it's almost warped and to sepia, and the Witch of Greed that Subaru and Amelia talk to is a younger, more immature, more malicious person than the one that Beatrice and Roswaal knew.
Yeah,
that's why
that
he
is-
clarifies the difference.
Yeah, that's not the
Yeah.
echidna. That is the Witch of Greed. That's not the echidna.
That's true.
They know.
The innocent, so the like childish naivety of trying to change fate by herself, she then learns that that was foolish, and that was her, at her apex, casting grand magics, or
Yeah.
creating enemies like Hector, right? And then as she realized that she's just innocently curious about the world, and that she needs other people, Roswaal, apostles, all these people to try to defy fate for her, she realized that she can't do it alone, and that she's there as somebody who is able to pass by her knowledge that she has with her authority. It's like, I'm waiting for the person just as much as like Satella is waiting for somebody to kill her. Echidna was waiting for somebody to be able to defy the fate, and she was hoping that for example, Beatrice would find that person, and that's why she sent out there with that mission.
Yeah, someone you can trust all my wisdom and information to is someone who can do something with it.
Yes, that, because hold on, that also means like if Echidna has this knowledge that is essentially what the observers have. Does the observers know of Subaru and know what he's doing, right?
Well, they know. I mean, maybe it could be. It's like we know, for example, Otto isn't included in that book, so for whatever reason, he's not being looked at by. We can assume here the observers either. But Subaru's role had a specific thing that was supposed to happen, which is this impulsive person that is being incredibly selfish, and it's the version of Subaru that first appears in Arc 1.
Yeah.
Would have done exactly what Roswaal wanted if he never died and learned from his mistakes. But because he has that ability, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy at first, where Roswaal knows that he's supposed to send the assassin after Amelia in the city, and that gets thwarted by Subaru and Reinhard. Then he's supposed to allow the mobbies to attack, let that proceed, let everything proceed as it will, until he's confronted directly by Subaru deciding to actively go against what's supposed to be in that book.
Yes, that's when he actually challenges fate, rather than playing with the idea.
Mm-hmm. Because up until then, he had been following the book. Otherwise, Roswaal would have caused things to reset again.
You're right. No, hold on, right? I've just realized this is the reason why Echidna gives Subaru the advice. When he makes that resolution to her near the end, it's almost like she's seeing the growth of her future self in Subaru. Of, I want to save others and love others, but I need to learn how to love myself and create that community of like love and strong bonds and trust and relationships, right? Which is what the lesson she learned, and that's why Echidna no longer makes him an apostle, and also gives him the advice about Garthiel.
Right, two things that actively go against what she had written down in her Tome of Wisdom.
Exactly. And that's crazy. This is going so deep into like the structure of this series and like the themes. It just, in all of these moments that we've just because I'm sure there's other moments we're forgetting that are smaller that relate to this too. That is insane. One additional thing that's very out of context to this current situation I wanted to add, Connor, is the thing where you said love wasn't quantifiable earlier. It's actually a really nice allegory towards what Subaru says to Amelia at the end of Arc 3 of happiness, it has no limit. Your cup of happiness is being overfilled, and like that means you can spread it to others. I really like that sentiment. I think it really hits to the message of the story. I
actually got that sentiment from an old Disney Channel original movie.
Oh, yeah?
About twin girls that got separated at birth, who were witches. It was called Twitches, I think. Where one of them starts to meets her sister's parents and starts to care about them. And they say, well, you loving them doesn't mean you love me any less. You are able to love people more. You aren't taking away love for me by giving it to them. You have enough love to give to everyone.
Are you saying that Amelia and Satella are Twitches?
I am indeed saying that Amelia and Satella are Twitches, yes.
Now, this is for all the people that have watched the Remith podcast we did out there. Does that mean that also the polygamy ending is also relevant to the themes of the story?
Yes, I think that it might be early setup that Subaru is able to love multiple people, because he doesn't say the number one and number two in my heart anymore. They're
he doesn't.
They're both number one,
because that's not quantifiable. we cooking today.
There's too many avenues to cook down. I think we're like the grills are all fired up, and we're just like we're trying to flip all the patties on the grill, but it's too much for just the three of us alone to talk about all at once. Do we have anything more that we want to say about this arc in particular? Or do you want to continue on with our?
Well, we should. You're right. We should get back to the actual phase itself and talk about the part I don't want to talk about.
Even though this discussion was great, there
is something that we
need to talk about specifically because we don't want to.
Yeah, Tarita has her named chapter in this arc, and I still hate her. I still don't like reading about her. I don't think that her backstory was all that well written or intriguing. I think there was 2 paragraphs out of it that I took anything from. And that's that her soul sister changed in personality after becoming a stargazer, and that she got what she kept referring to as a commandment, amongst other things, from being a stargazer that she shouldn't have otherwise had.
Don't we also learn that stargazers have like a weird, almost telepathic connection to each other?
They say that they get information from one another, but I think that might be a weird translation, trick of the language, where one of them knowing something allows the others to know something as well. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily that they are talking to each other
like
long
a web
distance.
Of knowledge.
Yeah, like an encyclopedia they can all access.
Like a tome of wisdom.
Yeah,
I suppose,
like a cloud storage that they all have access to.
Literally.
Like they have one line from the Tome of Wisdom that they all know.
Oh my god, yeah. But
some of them are contradictory. I can tell you that now, that they can't all be 100% true.
Who are the fakes?
But yeah, we see this backstory with her soul sister. And let's talk about the contents of it. So there's 2 types of people in the Shudrak village, a guardian and a hunter.
Yep.
And she was a guardian. And Tarita was also a guardian because of that, right? And
no, Tarita was a hunter.
Tarita's a hunter.
Okay, got it. Yeah, she can't do anything. Tarita can't do anything. So they were 2 halves of a whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was the idea. Like it's a Ram thing where it's like, you know, Ram's so amazing, so Rem will cook, you know, that sort of thing.
Tarita's kind of a bad clone of Rem, where she has the inferiority complex with her actual sister. And has all these like skills that her soul sister doesn't have, like that they can make up for each other's weaknesses. And that I don't think it was that particularly well done, because she is directly inferior to Mizilda. That Mizilda is just more skilled, more intelligent, and a better leader. And then her soul sister had abilities that did complement Tarita's. That Tarita has no home skills at all.
One of the things that I'm just going to straight up be honest about of this backstory that really confuses me is Tarita pulling the knife on her soul sister near the end of this backstory, where she's starting to get she's been frustrated this entire time with the change of personality, and that she's focused on this commandment instead of being a Shudrakian, and she should be happy with being a Shudrakian. She should be happy to be the mother of her child, because this character, the Stargazer character, what's her name? God.
Mariuli,
thank you. That was hard. She is, as she's dying because she's sickly, and she's talking to Tarita about this, she says that what was the point of her life? Like, what did she live for? And then she thinks, oh, this is what I lived for, grabs Tarita, and is like, you must fulfill my commandment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of killing this black-haired, black-eyed traveler who will
1,000 nights from now.
1,000 nights from now that will cause this great calamity? Disaster.
Cause the great disaster.
Yeah.
Or technically she says is an ally of the oncoming great disaster, doesn't she?
That's a good point. But you know what that makes me think of? What if it's always like, is it Subaru, right? And they're like, is it Abel?
Yeah.
Because they mistake that. What if it's actually Al that she's talking about?
Oh.
It could be.
Oh.
Or it could be that it was Subaru and she did it once and Subaru took that as his way to get a hold of Rem successfully. And that is going to help prevent the great disaster.
True.
Hold
but
on.
can they read that?
I just thought something. We learn in this phase, and this has been hinted before, but it's never been directly stated. Even though Al is saying this in a joking way, Al directly confirms that he knows how Subaru's authority works by destroying the world and reworking it.
Yeah, I wonder if he's experienced that before
He
and
has
just
to.
noticed the world end
He
at
has
some
to have
points in his
experienced
life.
that. He has to, and that's why he feels the way he feels about Subaru, right?
I also wonder if it's intuition. If it's just like his intuition about his authority. He's like, I see. So the reason why in my life I see this guy having this crazy luck, right, is because he has an authority like me. We're brothers like that. And his ability is that because Al talks about this a bit more, he's like, I trust in him succeeding because if he doesn't, the world is going to end, right? That's actually the intuition that Al has about it. I don't think that maybe he's experienced it and remembers it. I think he just knows about it.
Well,
Like Roswell, then.
Yeah.
the reason I suggest this is because he remembers Ren. Like how Subaru, because of his loops and the way his authority works, bypasses the authority of gluttony.
We don't know that that's for sure why, though. It could simply be that Subaru is able to remember people because he was not from this world, and Al does too. We already are fairly certain that Al does remember the people who have been eaten.
The reason I think this, right, is because Ram was really powerful at the point she was at when the fight in the Oni village takes place, which I think all three of us are almost certain Al was there and present, and probably one of the main fighters, right?
At least believe. I don't know if I would say almost certain, but I do believe that that is the case.
That makes a lot of sense.
If he had to use his authority then to loop, is that the reason why, because he's used this authority and seen Rem, because of that, he now will always remember her regardless of what the authority of gluttony does?
No, because like Subaru knew that people were missing after the battle with the whale, even though he didn't meet them personally.
Oh, okay.
And similar with like Otto's entourage and like the other people who get lost in those fights.
So it's not necessary that the mechanics of the authority are what making them remember. It's because they have this authority that they remember.
I genuinely think it's just because that they're both isekai people.
Oh, and
that is why
that's
they're
the
exempt
exception.
from the memory loss.
Okay, or because they don't live under the domains of Ode Lagana.
Right, because the only thing that gets removed from Subaru's memory was his time in this world that the books of the dead knew about.
Yes.
But because that they didn't lose their own memories, it's linked to just kind of who they are, which is part of their ode, which was created in another world.
In another world. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And is that, do you think, one of the things that Teppei was trying to establish with Ode Lagana in Arc 6?
Not necessarily. That is just how I've always assumed that things worked, was that the memory loss of their names being eaten doesn't apply to them because they are from another world. That is just a rule of the system.
Do you know what? I actually remember, I think, I was thinking that was like the reason why Subaru only forgot his memories in that world when it happened. I just completely forgot about it and didn't even in my brain apply it to Al, because he's in the same situation, right? So
well, he's lost the opposite, which is weird to me.
Yeah, which is why my theory of Pandora trying to create someone from this world is what I thought.
Or he's just lying. He could just be lying about it.
He could be a lying fucker, couldn't he?
That actually does remind me of one of my other complaints for this phase, is that when we get perspectives from Al or Oobleek or even the limited time we have with Yorna, is I just know that there is a constant effort being written of not having the characters think of things that are going to foil the plot later.
Yeah.
And that is really frustrating to me.
Yeah. It's not a case of like it's not a case of that thing of like, oh yeah, so they have this knowledge. They don't have this knowledge. They have this knowledge. Teppei is just writing them and their perspective in a certain way so we don't learn the things they know about.
Yes. Which to me, I would just rather not have their perspectives then.
Yeah.
Than feel like I'm being tricked by the narrator.
Yeah.
Right. The narrator is tricking you. It's also illustrative of the way in which the focus of the arc makes that more apparent, right? Because if it was like an easy mystery, like and the mystery was something that we were curious about beforehand, we wouldn't really care that the narrator is perspective on whomever, because like that happens in plenty of arcs beforehand where like the camera is over the shoulder of this character, right? And we see that, but we don't see their thoughts, right? We just see the camera angle. And that's what this is, but it's like the camera is like flipping back and forth a million times, or like cut take 3, cut take 2, and then it's like we like there's nothing that's aided by having these multiple perspectives.
Yeah,
I don't think it serves anything that well. Just making things disjointed. Like you could even, I'm not saying this for Teppei's sake, but I'm saying for the audience's sake. It's fine if instead of this arc, and I know we got some nice information here, it would have been nice if we got it in a different way and just said that those, like, Teppei knows that those conversations, those interactions happened off screen if we focused on one person.
Yeah, because my only thing is, right, the whole point of these is that
we're on an interlude or side story. Sorry.
The whole point of these,
like what they did with Rem earlier.
Yeah, that would be how it'd have to work, because the whole point of these is that we as an audience need to learn information that Subaru does not, right?
Right, but we've had perspective shifts like that before.
But
like Arc 5 is full of us looking from other people's view for long periods of time that Subaru doesn't get to learn about, which is where we get our first Al perspective at all and learn from that.
Yeah.
But when we had his perspective against Capella, it felt more like a third-person objective point of view, where we are just looking at the world and seeing Al do this, rather than being the in-character narration that Teppei likes to do more often. Which this felt more like we were in Al's head, but we weren't getting to really see the things that he was thinking.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess one thing we're just mentioning overall, like the specific reasons why we don't enjoy Terita as much as some of the, like, even because regardless, we've already overall talked about our overall thoughts with the structural problems with this part of the phase, right? But I guess we could, before we move on, talk a bit more about Terita, like why we dislike some of these stuff a bit more in depth.
Yeah, I think the structure of the flashback wasn't even. I can't be critical because I know that there's probably a lot of good parts about this backstory. Like in retrospect, it's not like a bad done backstory or anything, but I wasn't emotionally moved by it because of the suddenness of it.
Yeah.
The character who it was, how much relationship we had built up on them, but also the kind of flips in the narrative of the backstory itself was obviously bookmarked. It was like, here's the cliff notes of what happened to this character, right? And then on top of that, it's like the thing where it's like, oh, by the way, she was always sickly since she was a child, and now she's sick and dying.
Oh, and like, she's Utakata's mom.
Yes. Yeah, and she's Utakata's mom, but Utakata doesn't hate Terita because she saw that it was actually her mom that killed herself with the knife.
It was like Teppei's like, I had this entire backstory. I had the notes on the side telling all the points that I had hit. And he was like, and this, and that, and this. And it's like, it wasn't effectually like scene by scene like that much because of that. It felt like a Cliff Notes.
Yeah, and it made me not have much emotional investment in what was happening with that. Because I was talking about this before the podcast started to the audience at home with the boys, but when I see a named chapter in ReZero, when I see like a chapter with the name of someone in it, I am like excited, right? This is like a big moment. I'm like, oh, okay, this is huge. We're gonna see something cool. But for this specifically, it felt extremely underwhelming. And Terita in herself, I don't hate her as a character personally. I don't have like a dislike per se for her. I just feel she is the weakest POV character I've read, point of view wise, from the story so far. And also, she's the character I probably care the least about in the story so far. Like, an example I made before the podcast was Zakir Osman's name chapter that we talked about in an earlier phase. He's a character that, like Terita, doesn't have like much screen time or like doesn't have much built. Like, we don't delve deep into it before his named chapter. But there's the way to pay right the foreshadowing before you see Zakir's chapter is what makes that named chapter, one, really funny, and two, really entertaining and like emotionally investing.
It's also the narrative placement of his name chapter of being where we see their plan to invade the city unfold is from his perspective. And his name chapter then serves to explain why this works in a way that you don't see what's going to happen coming. But once it starts happening, you understand immediately, oh, this makes total sense of why this would work.
But I don't get that with Tarita's name chapter. I think it's a shame. Because I like some of the concepts Tepe is playing with her character of this preordained stargazer stuff, right? And the whole tragedy of her soul sister being a stargazer. And now this is something that I was confused about when it comes to her having these nightmares. Is she actually a stargazer, or is she dreaming of what the her soul sister ordained for her from this commandment?
She is either fantasizing or having nightmares about what she is expected to do as the last request of her soul sister.
Yes.
Tarita herself is not a stargazer. She just has one of their commandments, which is what the rest of them use to recognize as being a stargazer, is to have this commandment as in a rule, an order, a goal that they have to accomplish, or that they need to see through.
To prevent a great bad thing from happening or something from happening.
Not even necessarily to prevent that. It's just a commandment in general in this sense is referencing the thought of this is a order from on high, is do this thing. Yeah. Whether the fact that stops the great disaster or not, it overwhelmed Mariuli's entire life to the point where she felt that failing to do it herself made her life meaningless and had to pass it on to Tarita. Yes. I don't mind that part of the story. I actually think that's the most engaging thing about Tarita's character is somebody else. And that is why
that's the problem.
Hate her. Tarita is a waste of space because her entire character is either a bad clone of Rem, a bad clone of Subaru, or related to other people. It's whether it's her connection to Mazelda or her connection to Mariuli. And none of her character story is about overcoming that and becoming her own person like Rem's is, where she starts out just based on her connection with Rom and then her connection with Subaru, and now has this chance to be her own person, or had the chance to grow into her own person like we saw in the Rem if. Tarita gets her named chapter here and doesn't grow during it. She just chooses not to fulfill what was bestowed upon her by her sister.
Yeah.
That's the point of, like, that's the, not the apex, that's the climax of her story that we've had established so far, is she chose to allow someone to sacrifice themselves just like she did before and didn't fulfill what her sister asked, even though she tried to do before.
But have you considered that she loves Flop, has a crush on him?
That was another thing that I'm just like, wow, this I feel like it's kind of forced. I don't know if you guys agree, but every single time where I see a slip in of like, and you know, what would Flop think about me, or you know, what would this handsome guy, but he's not handsome like Flop is, so it's okay. I'm just like,
you know,
where is this coming from?
I completely missed that she liked Flop. In my memory had that just the Shudrakian people in general thought that Flop was handsome and cute. I must have conflated in my mind that she was just the generic Shudrakian imagining for Flop, which is not a highlight or well-spoken part of her character. So I had issues with her coming into this arc. I was reading it hoping to have a better view of her, and I came out of it with the same view, that she is a pointless character. And if our character tier list video hadn't gotten corrupted, she and Oobleek were some of my F tiers.
Yeah, very rarely do characters, and I'm saying this, you know, I'm sure there's some people who like her fine. I don't think there's too many people that are obsessed about her. But usually in ReZero, when characters retread similar themes and emotions, it feels poignant.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel very poignant at all. It just feels kind of there to kind of cushion the plot out a bit more. You know what I mean? Like, like Tepe is a really smart writer, so he's thinking, okay, this character is going through this thing. What is their purpose in being here, right? he already had her walk in. He's like, I had this set up. So like, I had this thing set up where she goes and tries to figure out why she should be the new chieftain. And I'm going to figure that out while I'm writing right now. And then he figures it out and he's like, hopefully that's enough. And then it's like, it's nothing new. We do get new information, but it's not about her. Her personality doesn't shine through that much here. All she is like, I can't do it. And he's like, you're a coward, says everybody else. He's like, fine, I'll prove you guys wrong. I'm not a coward. She doesn't say it like that, but she's like, I have to. I'm too sad about my past, so I'm going to defy fate once again. And then it's like, okay.
I wonder if Tarita was meant to have a more significant and important role in Tappei's original plan for Arc 7, because she, as I said, does clearly have a parallel to Rem's story. Like even her sister has the pink hair, and the other sister is like the one that she has the inferiority complex to. So like if the story had started with him getting shot and ends with the point that Tarita takes over for Mazelda after they get into the fight in Guarl, and that was where he was planning on having Subaru leave and rejoin and go back to the story as he was planning to do it initially, if that would have been like the flow of the character arc there, and that once we realized that she was the one that shot him in the first loop, that would have been like the grand kind of reveal that he doesn't have this person coming after him anymore, and that Rem can see Tarita's evolution of coming past in front of her sister before she gets to meet her own.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think what's actually missing, now that you mention it, is Rem's presence in their relationship is not shown here. And that is actually the biggest mistake here, is that it's like, if Rem's not here to comment about the sister, like to think or ruminate upon what Tarita is going through, what Tarita is going through is hollow because it's only to us, the readers, and we already understand that it's a parallel.
Yeah.
But it's not aiding anybody else. It's not aiding any characters that we care about that she's going through this. Like, that's true. Like, when you really think about it, it's like, it wasn't set up to make us care about Tarita that much. And then her commiserate and her trying to overcome this doesn't really aid anybody present, aside from doing a perfunctory mechanical thing to stop this devastation.
It doesn't even change the way people thought about her, because they were all expecting her to be this badass archer before she goes through her character moment, and then she becomes the badass archer after her character moment.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no defiance of expectations. There's no evolution of character. Now, the thing is that I'm at the point of where maybe that will change in the future because of what's been set up here. But my thing is, why is this the named chapter then? Why is this the big moment, right? Like, that's what when I see a named chapter, that's what I normally think. Now, I'm sure, like, Tappei has subverted this before, and I'm sure he'll do that again in the future. But this didn't feel like it worked in that sense. And do you know what I think lends credit to your guys' idea that Tarita was originally supposed to be a more important character? We get foreshadowing to the Soul Sister stuff with Holly and Kuna. That's a thing that's already set up within the story with them. Maybe Tappei was trying to set that up with them, and it just, I don't know, like, in terms of what directions he chose to go through, but it just didn't end up working out with, even though he'd already done that setup.
I wonder if he wrote that conversation with Rem and Holly and Kuna, and it was originally with Tarita and Mazelda, and then she gets the context of, yeah, we're sisters, but we're not that close. Tarita had a soul sister growing up, but she's gone.
True.
I could see that, actually, yeah.
But regardless, on a funnier but not completely unrelated note, and sorry to just immediately segue tangent this, we get more of Oobleek this phase. I still don't like him. He is very difficult to read, and I don't enjoy it when his character is on screen.
I'm gonna be honest, right? Again, I'm loving some of the lore implications with the Stargazer stuff, but Oobleek's dialogue is some of the most painful dialogue to read in the series. Like, I can never take him seriously when he's on screen. And I don't know if you guys agree with this, but every single time he's saying something foreboding and deep, it just doesn't come across as serious. And so I don't take it seriously, even though I know it's probably the intent of Tappei to make him like a character that says all these deep, important things, but he's actually a comedic goofball or like weird and out there, but it isn't hitting for me.
It's definitely supposed to be off-putting. Like, I don't think he's a well-liked person in general.
No.
Abel doesn't seem to have a good impression of Stargazers.
Yes, you're right. Which is, I guess, we will talk about Abel in a second, because that's an important character. I want to.
That's a good way to finish this. I just wanted to point out that Oobleck's here. I didn't like him, but he doesn't really do much in this arc, this phase.
Teppei is trying to make it seem like that he's like, not too menacing. He's like menacing in like a chill way,
Oh,
he's like too aloof to be menacing, but then he's actually menacing.
But he did that with Roswell already and did it better.
Yeah, it's almost like he's trying to make a prophetic hippie, right? I think that's if we're going to talk about character archetypes, right? Like Roswell is the machinating clown. Oobleck is supposed to be this very like chill guy that has a dreadful idea of what is to come, but is playing coy with it. Yeah. Because he directly states about this disaster, right? I don't care about this because this isn't the great disaster, you fucking idiots. What? You're stupid. This isn't the great disaster we all know about. Guys, come on.
Yeah. It
is strange. But on the topic of characters I do want to talk about, Abel in this part of the phase has some really interesting stuff going on.
I want to just real quick commend Abel on his ability to handle a crisis situation and handle it extremely well.
Yeah.
To the point that his impersonator knows his capability to such a perfect degree that they say the exact same thing because they both know what Abel would say in that scenario to be the best option.
Yes.
Good job, impersonator, too.
Interestingly enough, the impersonator, when we read a bit from their perspective of the narration, we get a part of where they're thinking, like, this is the optimal way Vincent Valachi would do this or something like that. Something to that degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting the dynamic of these two. They literally call it the two emperors, right? I'm finding really interesting, and I'm so excited to learn more about what the hell is going on with these two. And Abel specifically says, "I go by Abel now," right? When Yorna calls him Vincent Valachia.
When he has the mask on, I think he refers to himself as the Emperor, or lets Yorna refer to him as the Emperor when it falls off for a moment.
Or he at least says, "I do not refer to myself by that name anymore."
Yeah, something to that akin. So at the moment, he is Abel because Chisha Gold is Vincent Valachia.
Yes.
So was there something you specifically wanted to touch on with Abel, other than kind of just glowing him up like I did?
I think he's so cool, and I'm honestly, I'm going to be honest, he's one of my favorite new characters in the series. I just love reading any of his dialogue, his thoughts, like what he's doing in a scene. But one thing I did want to talk about is the way he handles this great disaster and how everyone around him thinks of him as this perfect ruler because he's got logic, but he's cutting off what he said is like frivolousness or
he doesn't waste his time worrying about stuff that isn't going to matter.
Yeah, exactly. And the way he convinces Yorna is by trying to plead to her emotions, but in a way that makes logical sense and would direct this situation to calm down. And then also the Vincent Valachia, the other emperor, acting in a way to make Tanza sacrifice herself to make sure those events play out that way. I'm very curious, especially because in recent phases we've heard things like Abel saying, "I am war," right? Things like that to that degree, like these big astronomical concepts.
Mm-hmm.
I very much feel like Abel is trying to embody that ruler who serves the state mentality. In especially in a lot of late modern history, this idea of, I'm going to actually be a history nerd here. There was a Prussian king at one point called Frederick the Great, which is a lot of people's historical example of a king that believes the king serves the state instead of the state serving the king.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Abel embodies that idea in a very interesting way of him believing that the empire is strong and the empire's people are strong, and I must protect them in their moments of weakness, almost, right?
He has to, I think it's more like he has to enable them to be strong.
Yes, exactly.
Because he's standing at the back of the fight, bleeding from the head, watching everyone else fight to their best, knowing that he's done everything he could to put them in the best positions.
Exactly, yeah.
Abel reminds me a lot of a character from a different anime called Code Geass. He feels very similar to the main character of that, Lelouch, where he's this very intelligent, not physically strong, but people tend to flock around him even when they find him to be a colossal asshole as a great and powerful leader, that's Abel to a key. He is a colossal asshole, but he's really, really good at his job. And it would be hard pressed not to want to work for him in this environment and scenario. But to kind of go on your history thing, he also reminds me a bit of a lot of historical texts of Julius Caesar. Rather than being someone who's grabbing power for the sake of grabbing power, he's doing the wars and committing like these fights and wars and attacks for the purpose of strengthening his nation as a whole. Because the Senate at that point is falling apart. It's corrupt. It's broken. It doesn't work. And so when they are forced to rely on Caesar, he does his job, does it super well, stops the fight from happening, and then rather than giving power back to a bunch of bureaucrats who were arguing amongst themselves and letting the nation start to fall apart, he takes it on himself to become literally the world's first dictator.
Yes.
And does a really good job, refuses to be called king, doesn't want like any propaganda or anything else set up for him, and is eventually assassinated by the people he trusted most for going against what they believed he stood for, only to be replaced by someone who was what they feared Julius Caesar to be, an actual king, rather than someone to rule over them, to empower them to be a stronger, more stable version of themselves.
Because we see with Abel, he puts on this mask, this demon Oni mask, and it's almost like representing the fact that he's pretending to be the emperor that people want, that people need, that his society says that they should have. But inside, beyond that, is compassion. It's care. It's cunning, but it's genuine thoughtfulness. It's consideration. Why didn't he kill his sibling? It's like because he cares, right? There's part of them still human.
He could have used the Yang sword and just attacked and destroyed everything around them, but instead he had Yorna blow up a bunch of buildings and save all the people.
Well, he can't use the Yang sword, right?
Well, they were suggesting that he can. That he should have what was revealed to be the divine protection of the Yang sword, but he says, I'm not going to do it.
Oh,
wait, I won't draw it.
So you're saying he has the divine protection, but because he's choosing not to use it, that means Priscilla can be the one to wield it?
I don't know that there's actually a rule against it, necessarily.
Because
I have information that we can't share yet because it hasn't been revealed in the main story, and I'm sure it was also revealed in one of the EX novels.
Yes.
Okay.
But nothing has explicitly said that he and Priscilla can't both use it. It's just that he doesn't, and Priscilla tends to do it a lot.
I forget, Priscilla doesn't always just have it on her. She summons it whenever she needs it, right?
Yeah, it comes from like air.
Yeah,
it's her right.
Effectively creating it or pulling it from the ether, from the other realm.
So that
hers is like magically. There's mechanics behind how she pulls it out, rather than Rem just grabbing her mace as a gag.
So
it's like Gilgamesh.
Yes, like Gilgamesh. Okay, interesting. So that's just there's a thing that I don't know of yet that will expand my knowledge on that, you're saying.
Right. Or at least the way that it all works together hasn't been shown to you yet, but nothing has stated that it's impossible. He just says, I'm not going to pull it out, or I won't pull it out.
So it's a thing of his ideology that's stopping him then here.
Yes, and I think it's because he knows that he pulls out this Yang sword and he can start destroying all this Yin magic. He will probably kill Subaru doing it, but is definitely going to damage everything that the place has already taken in, including any of the people in the way. Whereas Yorna's method fights it off, gives everyone time to flee and escape the city, and then destroys a bunch of buildings that don't actually matter in the farthest corner of the empire, with a plan of where to take all the refugees afterwards.
Do you know what's interesting when we talk about like these historical analogs we've talked about for Abel? Another thing I could mention here, because I don't believe he is like Napoleon, but Napoleon's title was never Emperor of France, it was Emperor of the French. Even though Abel's title was officially Emperor of Wallachia, do you think he himself views himself as Emperor of the Wallachians in that sense? That he's...
I do, because Wallachia doesn't exist as a nation
As a
the way that
state.
Lagunica exists.
Yeah.
It's not a
It is
nation.
he is the leader of that territory and the one that has the most power within that territory. But like with the Shudrakians, they are their own isolated tribe with their own traditions and government and rituals
Yes.
and leader that didn't directly report to him.
So
He
it's,
says that they're supposed to, but they didn't.
so Wallachia isn't a nation state like Lagunica, maybe. Exactly. Like our modern idea of what a nation state would be.
Well, you think about the strongest people in this, phase. Olbart was talking about the fact that he loves being, the divine general because he's the ultimate outlaw.
Yes.
He doesn't actually have to do anything, even though he holds this official title. People in Wallachia are allowed to do whatever they want as long as they earn it through strength or through will or through power or the ideology, right? Like if you want to live outside the reach of the law, just like Yorna does with her, Chaos Flame, all she had to do was, have an ability strong enough to protect it all. And she did. And because of that, it took the combined might of the entire empire of Wallachia and all the divine generals to get them under heel.
Yeah.
But even that didn't destroy the city.
Yeah.
It was just, a truce called between them so that they could, work together. That shows the commitment of we're not going to punish you for doing that. You've committed your strength to something, and because of that, you've earned the right to live in our border undisturbed. You know,
because in that sense, another thing that goes against Wallachia, instead just being a cultural concept, instead of like a nation, it can't be a nation state because there are people that are above the rule of law, right?
Yes, there are.
Which is these generals. And the whole point is that the emperor is the strongest because he can bring them to heel the strongest.
Well, these generals are also a newer concept.
Yeah.
Or not a newer concept, but they only recently were reintroduced. I think Abel mentioned earlier that they haven't been around that long.
And there's probably
they didn't have none of these generals, I believe, had a predecessor.
Oh, so this is the first time they've been reinstated in a long time.
Yes.
So almost like the nation is going back to its original roots in a way. But almost by doing that, it's like maybe gone bad because we see that the country not only relies a lot on these divine generals to function, but also that it's almost like a corruption thing, right? It feels
or maybe Abel, as he was implying here, knew about the incoming great disaster and was getting contingencies ready for that.
Oh, and that's why he set that up?
Yeah, to have these ultra-powerful forces, basically like an on-call doctor at the ready to start combating whatever's coming.
That too. I also wonder if this is probably something you all agree with. He purposely made a system that was easy to corrupt to see how to see who would corrupt it,
Oh, so so the taint shows itself so he can cut it out.
Yeah, I think that's his goal here. He's subverted and he's like, well, this is what I expected. I have a contingency for this.
And so Wallachia will rise again stronger from its own ashes.
Yeah, that's what he's trying to do right now.
So we've talked on Abel's concepts a lot. There is one other part from this phase that we should address, and that is his plan he apparently has had for a bit, but now is revealed for Subaru, or what would he, I guess, end up calling him? The lost child of Vincent Wallachia.
He calls it the illegitimate
child. Yeah, which is a nice. People were definitely calling that when Subaru got regressed the first time.
Yeah.
Vincent or Abel's gonna play this off like he has the true heir to the throne after he got assassinated or something. Is Subaru going to become emperor by claiming to be Vincent's kid?
Yes.
And it was a lot of theories thrown around. So then when this actually came out, people were pretty excited to have been proven right.
Yeah, because I remember us even talking about it in previous phases, right? Of this is because characters like Olbart were bringing up the fact a lot that Subaru looks like he's from the Imperial family, sorry. And it was that kind of thing of, I remember us talking about So Abel is clearly going to be working with this in some way. And because he can't be Vincent Valakia, he is going to use Subaru as the illegitimate child of Vincent Valakia to press claim on the Empire.
Yep.
Which is a ingenious idea, I must say. That is some really good political maneuvering. And it makes me very excited because I feel like a lot of character development for Subaru is going to happen because of this. And he's going to be mad that Abel is making him do this role.
It is also another identity that Subaru is going to have to assume in this arc.
Oh, and like to become pretender to the Valakian throne?
Well, he's been given Rem's hero. He has been given Natsumi Schwartz, the poster child of war.
Yep.
Then he got Natsumi Schwartz, the negotiator emissary for the rebellion. Then he got young Natsuki, Nashiki Shubaru, or however they wrote it. Little kid. And now that kid has been forced under the persona of illegitimate child of Vincent Valakia.
So he's having another identity forced onto him.
Mm-hmm. One that he might have to embrace or could just fully reject and cause more problems for Abel.
But the thing is, right, Abel has been smart with this because he almost has to accept this to survive because at the end of this phase, Subaru is away. Like we don't know where he is currently, but he's been taken to another part of Valakia away from everyone here. In a sense, Subaru has to maybe rely on this idea to even survive where he may be at when he learns of it, right? Because that's also Abel's way of saying, well, this is how we're going to find him.
Mm-hmm.
Find the illegitimate child of Vincent Valakia.
Yeah, the disastrous child that caused all of this havoc,
Yes, like he is the one who will bring havoc upon the Empire because he is he will be now the poster child of war as well. Again.
Or the son of the poster child of war.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, man, so many interesting concepts at play here.
So, the last thing I wanted to ask for you two, and Gold, if you know the answer to this just because of spoilers you stumbled on, then just don't reveal it. But where do you think Subaru has wound up? And who is this other person that has pulled him out of the water with Tanza?
Okay, the only reason I know who this is because I saw an illustration at the bottom of this chapter, but because I wouldn't learn that information naturally just by reading the text.
You're supposed to guess it. I'm just telling you now. You're
I'm
supposed to guess this.
It? Okay, then, Cecilia segment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, we've been told a lot about Cecilius throughout this arc and how he is kind of like, not only the strongest person in the Empire, but a crazy guy who is impossible to bring under heel and just causes havoc wherever he goes.
Now, if I remember right, didn't somebody mention that Mr. Segment was supposed to be living in the capital with Arakia?
Yes.
But Subaru's wound up in water.
Water, yes.
That's a good point.
Which is not by the capital, right?
It's in the middle.
There's two major sources of water in Valakia, which are the Great Waterfall, for one, that's on the south.
Yeah, I know another one.
There's a few rivers and such. And then there's the lake around on the western side.
Oh, I see. So that could, narrowing that down, there could only be those two places where he could be.
Yeah. There's two other places. There's lovely Lake Penelope or whatever it is. And then there's Gladiator Island, Gunhide.
Well, that's in the lake on the west.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in the middle of the lake.
Wait. Gladiator Island. Is that the island that Owl refers to?
Yes, it is.
Oh, and the one he put the rebellion down around previously in the past is around that area? Oh.
But as a thought for that, we learned from the side stories and such that the escape room from the capital led Abel really close to the Great Waterfall as well.
Yes. Yes.
So there is a direct path from the capital to the Great Waterfall.
Interesting. Oh, but it must be now here's what I'm thinking, right? If this place is a hotbed of rebellions, right, and Al was someone that put a rebellion down around this place, is part of Abel's, obviously he's not going to know exactly what's going to happen here, but is this going to work out? Because Subaru's going to show up there, be the illegitimate child of Vincent Valakia, and start a rebellion around him on this Gladiator Island?
Well, do you think Subaru knows that that's what Vincent is claiming him to be?
I think he's going to learn it from another character. It is information he's going to learn at some point, and he's going to.
Or maybe he's going to do it intuitively. That's just the rebellion spirit.
Oh, he's inadvertently gonna become the role that Abel wants him to be.
Yeah, the machinations. Abel's too smart. He knows Subaru's character.
Like someone that's gonna rebel against the status quo and say
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
better
yeah.
there's a better path than this.
Well, you see how he already disagrees with the society of Lakia very heavily.
And
You know, if given the opportunity, he will be like, "Hey guys, maybe some of you are all right. Maybe you should try to fight against, being here."
and a weirdo like Cecilia Segment might just go along with that.
Yeah, and he'll always win.
Well, because this is also my thought too, right? Like we learn, I think it's from Zakir Osman when he talks about Cecilia's segment in a previous phase with Abel. He mentions that he can't be considered human, and that
he's an inhuman monster, an
Inhuman
incomprehensible inhuman monster that
And
nobody likes.
Cecilius mentions at the end here, we're about to go on a great like story or journey, like something great is about to happen.
It's time to take our roles on the grand stage.
It's time to take our roles on the grand stage. Is Cecilius playing into this and he wants that to happen too? Or is he doing this for his own amusement kind of thing? Of like,
Well, you know what I think, and this is just my intuition, and I don't know anything about his character. My guess is that his father was so rigid and boring that now that he's this strong, all he wants to do is kind of kick back and have fun. I think that's the character that I kind of see from him. Yeah.
I'm really fascinated by this. I feel like we're going to lead into Subaru leading a rebellion, becoming Subaru becoming a leader of people, not just his friends and his companions, but like a political leader. Maybe not in like, and I don't think that may be his ultimate destiny, but I think it could be a showing of his potential of a leader, right? Like him becoming a political leader in this scenario. Oh.
Just to imagine what would be the ideal scenario. Just remember the acronym WWFD. What would Fourier do here?
What would Fourier do here? No. This is why, to this day, the loss of our EX1 episode...
We'll get it back after the arc.
We will get it back. We will get it back. But
we'll make Kyle's read it and then have an easy discussion.
Exactly. But, Fourier and Subaru, cool parallel character stuff, and I think we're going to see that in this next part. Well, not the next part of the phase, because I feel obviously we're going to be learning about other people at the same time. But when we get to the next phase, I feel like we're gonna have some Fourier vibes be coming in, especially because Subaru, as this child, no longer has the inhibitions of the previous Subaru, right? So he's actually gonna just do things. He's gonna not hold himself back and actually do things he believes in. Oh, I'm excited. Oh, and also, on the note of Tanza surviving this great calamity, as we mentioned earlier, and Tanza now being with Subaru at the end of this part of the phase, how is she going to influence him? And how is their relationship dynamic going to go? I'm very curious.
I think he's gonna appreciate Louis more.
Yeah, I remember reading that and being so sad because he had just formed a positive relationship with Louis.
And now they've been taken away from
and they were immediately separated.
Teppei is so mean to Subaru. Like, this guy, this poor now boy, cannot take a fucking break. Every time you think you've seen an inkling of, oh yeah, okay, he's figured it out, he's got a support network, we're kind of chilling with this, right? Yank, the carpet gets pulled out from under him, and he's on the floor again.
Yeah, not only the entrance to Arc 7, but this scene in particular was what I was imagining when we had Ed Psychotrist on, and he talked about Subaru getting whisked away to an unfamiliar situation.
Yes, exactly.
Because this has now happened twice, and he is again with someone who has no idea who he is, what he can do, and he is even less familiar with this person in another unfamiliar scenario.
It's really like Subaru is in like a relationship mixer where he gets like 5 minutes to talk to somebody and then he gets rotated around.
Yeah, speed dating.
Yeah, he's speed dating all these characters in Valakia.
But this is also a time for Subaru to show his potential, right? Because before we see him with the bonds he's already made, now he has to make bonds afresh with new people and in a new and maybe hostile environment. And it's up to Subaru to use his own potential, his wits, his bravery, his leadership, everything that he has at his ability and what he's good at to make something of the situation, right? So it's almost as if this is, whilst it's sad, we have to see all these relationship again with like the people from Lagunica and him being separated, and now with the people that he's come close to in Wallachia and him being separated. But it's also a chance for the real and true Natsuki Subaru to make an appearance, right?
Right. Now, before we wrap up, and we're pretty much done here, there was one last thing I wanted to just bring up on this final scene here with Subaru over there, in that similar to the 11 seconds of death, this is the second instance we've had where he looped several times, unable to accomplish anything, and we don't even see all the deaths.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get your guys' feeling on that. Because if you didn't catch it, he drowned probably 20, 30 times trying to rescue, not even before he even realized he had Tanza. He says before he was just letting her go and then kept having to loop again in an attempt to keep her up as well.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's clear that he no longer has Ao's authority, because Ao's already got his authority, and I don't think they can
if that was ever the case.
If that was ever the case, right? But
because otherwise that means that his restart point is in the water. Which is kind of cruel for Satella to do.
Yeah.
But does Satella control the spawn point?
There's at least always been some indication that the spawn point was something that he could make a difference from.
Maybe it's the line of fate that he rides.
Maybe it's Tanza drowning here that's the problem.
Yeah.
And Tanza has to survive for whatever reason.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think it has to do with that. Maybe when the altered fate aligns with fate again at checkpoint or something like that. Also, one of the things that I think about is that it probably has to do with the ode being read wrong again. It's like, you can't really clarify it properly, like what's going on.
It's even more funkier now because Albert was in the middle of fixing it when all the events happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it could almost be not exactly in the same vein, but like in a similar idea of like mutation or genetic mutation, where this whatever concept is going on here has taken off its own thing entirely.
All right. Well, I'm curious to see what you guys think when we get to the phase that covers Subaru's journeys with Tanza elsewhere. But I'm honestly more excited about just getting to almost get your reactions to the second half of this phase, because it is so exciting.
Is it?
It is. I remember, because this first half of the phase was where I stopped reading week to week as Tappei was releasing them. And then I tried to come back several months later and attempt to refinish the phase, and I couldn't do it. I got to Rita's chapter, and I quit for a long time. Until after, like, Arc 8 had started and was decently into it. And I was on a road trip with just 15 hours and realized I need to have something to read in the dark, because I can't just turn on the car light. My family hates when people have that on when you're driving late. So I just had a phone out. Perfect chance to read. Forced myself through this first half of the phase, and then binged the rest of the arc so quickly because of how fast the second half of this phase hooked me.
Okay,
it was genuinely exciting, and it just kept getting. The rest of this arc is all a highlight for me. I love the entirety of Arc 7 from here on out.
Okay, I am very excited.
If that's the case, then maybe it'll be the same with us.
Yeah, obviously you can't say much because of spoilers, but do we get to see some new and different stuff with the direction Subaru story takes?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Oh, this is what I've been waiting for. Especially after we read EX1 and we talked about the similarities between Foria and Subaru, I have been hoping and praying for a moment in the story where we get to see something like this with Subaru. So I am salivating, and I'm also really curious to hear what we're going to see in this next half of the phase. Like, what am I going to learn that's going to make me like love this story even more?
Just real quick. So the second half of this phase is obviously at the same time period, and we know which characters weren't in Chaos Flame, right? So just initial guesses, what's going to happen in the second half of this phase, in the B phase of it.
We're probably going to have a side plot with the characters in the Fortress City. All of those characters that have been left behind. There's going to be some sort of threat they have to deal with. Or maybe it will take more of a fun, almost slice of life turn, and we'll see the events of them fixing up the city after the siege and like what they're doing to sort out the situation, and we'll get some big character moments. But I feel like there's gonna be a threat they have to deal with, right, from a story perspective. So I feel like we're gonna have some big moments with them. We'll see some development for Rem and Priscilla's relationship with Rem too, I think, and her relationship with Priscilla.
I mean, sure, but I want you to tell me something, like, even just a guess, what happens to them over there. Like here, Subaru exploded into a giant shadow mess, and Yorna had to blow up her city to stop it. What happens in Guarl?
I have no clue.
Right. I just want you to throw out anything. Make something up. Take a guess. Crazy ideas.
Okay. Maybe somehow, because of the way miasma works, the amount of times Subaru died in the city has caused a dense level of miasma, and some Marbies come to attack or something. Or maybe maybe an army of the Empire shows up. Because their information by now might have spread from Todd
That's a good point.
and Arakia. So maybe now there's going to be a almost another siege at the Fortress City, but we're on opposing sides. Now we're the defenders, right? Okay, that's my running theory at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And now we're going to see Rem, Priscilla, Flop, of course, Mizelda, all these characters we love, and especially we're going to see Heinkel. We're going to see Heinkel shine. He's going to do something really cool.
That's a good point. My interpretation is the other arm of the army that is, of course, loyal to the fake emperor is going to try to attack that fortress city. In doing so, there will be a moment in which we eventually reach like a moment where we kind of have them fighting, and then Subaru's squad comes in and then sneaks in and turns the battle at the end, and then I don't know, like a Sin Archbishop shows up at the end or something.
Oh, you're just gonna be like that big boom, Sin Archbishop shows up.
Yeah, or like a witch or something. I don't know.
If Abel's group returns with Louis, does that count as a Sin Archbishop showing up?
I mean,
that's a good point.
That's a good point. Oh wait, yeah, because Abel and Yorna and all of the people of Chaos Flame are going to go to the Fortress City, right? So that's
right. But just to quell some of the stuff, these are happening at the same time.
These are happening at the same time. But what I mean is, we're going to see some scary events, and then the resolution might be like after that. Like we'll have like, you know, we have these really cool moments for all these characters, and then in the future we get a moment from like the Lord of the Rings where the army comes over the hill.
Yeah, 100%. But it's going to be just.
Oh yeah.
You just hear the triumphant epic music in your brain.
Well, I am glad to see that your guys' expectations are still pretty mild for what's to come. And we will leave it with that this time, I think. That's a pretty good wrap-up point.
I think this was an awesome episode. I hope you guys at home watching, if you're still watching at this point, enjoyed this episode. Let us know what you think in the comments, and let us know, are our opinions stinky? Are our opinions based? Let us know, and tell us your own opinions too, because we read every single comment. We may not respond to every single one, but I can guarantee we read them all.
I at least read every single one to check for spoilers before I clear it for these guys.
Yes, we have our moderator here to make sure, because I somehow have dodged a lot of spoilers. So,
yeah, he's the last one. Don't ruin him.
Yeah, I'm the last one standing. Don't do it.
Yeah, tell me why I'm wrong about Tarita and why she's actually best girl. I'm eager to see all of your wrong opinions on it.
Give us that sweet engagement. Give us those likes, those dislikes, those comments, baby. Come on.
And make sure to like us. Make sure to subscribe us. Make sure to get a membership if you want some special access to some of our things coming out early.
Yes.
When they do. Season 3 is coming up, guys, and we're going to be doing a lot of content for that. So get excited if you're all excited, because I know I am. Arc 6 of our live reads will be starting up eventually, some point.
Just over the horizon.
Just over the horizon.
We have started recordings for it.
Yes, we have so much future content that's in the works for you guys that I think you may enjoy. And, you know, if you think that someone else may enjoy it, maybe you could share it. Like, say, if you really enjoyed this episode and you would like someone else that you know, either that's seen this part of the story or is at this point in the story currently for what specifically, share this video to them. See what they think. Let us know, because please, we love to hear it.
There's
And
some really
stay tuned for
exciting
some
stuff.
really exciting content. Same thing, Gold. Yeah, we have some really exciting stuff coming up. Can't share quite yet, but you'll be jaw on the floor when you get to
Yes.
see what we have coming.
Yes,
So
you
until then, best to bid you goodbye until next time. Bye.
Goodbye,
Yeah,
everyone.
bye-bye.
Have a wonderful
Thank
evening or day wherever you are.